Hello, nice to see you on my channel, Hearts and Shadows. Enjoy watching.
My name's Christopher. It took me a long time to admit I was a fool who built a life on trust, loyalty, and love, without ever realizing that the person I trusted most had been lying to me for over a decade. I found out what she'd done on a Wednesday. I'd already dropped the kids off at school, and I was halfway to the office when I realized I'd left my MacBook charger at home. Small thing, right? But I needed that charger, so I turned and went back home. I pulled into the driveway instead of the garage. It wasn't a conscious decision at the time, because I was leaving almost immediately, and I didn't want to deal with the rumble of the garage door and the clank it always made when closing. My wife, Lauren, works with me at my consulting firm. She had a background in finance and was sharp with numbers, so it made perfect sense to bring her into the company. I handled the vision, the operations, the bigger contracts. She took over sales tracking, payroll, and vendor accounts. I trusted her with my company the same way I trusted her with my heart. I signed over joint control of accounts, gave her full back-end access, and never questioned her role. Why would I? She had told me earlier she had back-to-back meetings at the office, so I assumed the house was empty. I moved quietly, heading straight for the kitchen counter where I'd last plugged in the charger I forgot. It was tucked behind the toaster like I left it. I was reaching down to pull it free when I heard faint voices talking. I paused just out of habit. Then I realized it was coming from down the hallway, closer to the bedroom. I figured maybe Lauren had taken a Zoom call from home or had a sick day she didn't mention. I started toward the hallway, but as I got closer, I could tell it wasn't a meeting. It was a phone call. Her voice was casual, almost playful. I heard another voice, a woman's, older. That's when I realized she was on speakerphone. Probably her mom. They talk a lot. I didn't mean to listen in. I was already turning to leave, thinking I'd let her finish. But then I heard her mother say, "Won't it break Chris if you leave?" It made sense to me that I was the topic of that discussion. Lauren told her mother that she doesn't care, then said he actually thinks those kids are his. Can you imagine? I mean, seriously. They look nothing like him. He's the perfect fool to have around. Her mother chuckled and told her to be careful with men like me. I stood frozen in place. My mind couldn't make sense of anything I just heard. I didn't wait to hear more. I walked out of the house as quietly as I came in, charger in hand. My hands were trembling as I got into the car. I drove to the office in silence. My mind kept looping the same question over and over. What if it's true? What if my babies aren't mine at all? And if they aren't, whose are they? Lauren and I have been married for 10 years. We met in our late 20s, both of us a little banged up from life, but still optimistic enough to try again. We had 2 kids, and for the most part, we lived what most people would call an ordinary family life. I'd wake up early to make breakfast, pack lunches, and get the kids in the car. That school run became one of the quiet routines I didn't even realize I cherished. The kids would argue about who got to sit in the front, and I'd play referee while navigating morning traffic. This morning, I dropped them off like always. Nothing warned me that life, as I knew it, had already started to collapse behind my back. By the time I parked at the office, I had only one clear thought. Before I did anything, I needed to know the truth for myself. The first step was paternity. Nothing else would make sense until I knew whether or not I was really their father. Everything else would come after. I sat at my desk at work, Googling at-home DNA test kits. I was just trying to confirm if I'd been living a lie. I found a couple of options online. Most were pretty straightforward, but I didn't want to wait around. I needed something fast and local. Eventually, I came across a provider with good reviews, clear instructions, and quick turnaround. I called their hotline, and the woman on the line was polite. She told me if I placed the order that day, the kit would arrive by tomorrow. I'd collect the samples, send them back, and the results would be ready in about 2 weeks. 2 weeks felt like forever. But I said yes, gave her the shipping info, and hung up. That night, when I got home, Lauren greeted me like nothing was wrong. She kissed my cheek and asked how my day went. If I hadn't heard her myself, I would have kept believing she loved me. That's the part that scared me the most, how easy it was for her to keep pretending, and how long I must have been blind to it. So I kept up my own performance. I asked about her day. I didn't push or show anything. I knew the second she caught on that something was off, she'd change her behavior. And I needed her exactly as she was, unaware and unguarded. The kit came the next day, just like they said. It arrived in a plain white package. I didn't even open it until after bedtime stories. The guide said I needed hair strands with the root attached. I took my time while they slept. I labeled the samples like they told me to, sealed everything, and packed all up. The next morning, I dropped the envelope at the post office on my way to work. By the second day of waiting for the DNA test results, I felt like I was losing control of everything I thought I knew. My mind was running in circles around questions I couldn't answer. Every time I looked at my kids, I saw pieces of a puzzle that no longer fit. I needed answers. I needed the truth, not guesses or assumptions. And then I remembered something from a few years back. A while ago, one of my business partners had been moving shady behind the scenes. At the time, I had quietly hired a private investigator to look into it. The guy had been impressive. He dug up information I never would have found on my own. I figured if he could find out what a grown man was hiding, he sure as hell could figure out what my wife was doing behind my back. So I pulled up the old number, called the PI, and told him I needed his help again, this time for something personal. I told him I needed to know where my wife went, who she saw, and what she did when I wasn't looking. I gave him her photo, her car's license plate, her work schedule, everything that might help. I asked for updates as he found things. He didn't ask too many questions. A week went by before I heard from him. He called and said Lauren left her office some afternoon around the same time and always ended up in the same part of town, not near any of our usual business spots. He told me he saw her park outside a brown brick apartment complex twice. She'd stay for about 40 minutes each time, then come out. That's when I started watching her too, as much as I could, without being obvious. I paid attention to the way she'd casually say she was running late because of a client emergency, or how she'd mention traffic even when I knew the roads were clear. She had always been quick with excuses, but now I was actually listening to them, and they didn't add up. I told the PI to keep going. I didn't want to act on half the story. I needed the full picture. I told him I wanted photos with timestamps. And if she thought I was still the perfect fool, then I was going to let her believe that for just a little longer. 2 weeks after I mailed out the DNA kits, I got the results. I told myself I was ready. But the moment I saw the words excluded as the biological father, it felt like the ground gave out under me. Many years of believing I was a father. I wasn't their biological dad. And Lauren had known. She had known. The private investigator I'd hired called the next day. I'd almost forgotten about him, with everything else going on. His voice was too calm for the news he was about to give me. He said, "Your wife's been seeing someone. Regularly." Then he gave me a name, and my stomach turned. It wasn't just anyone. It was a client. A man I'd known for years. I'd called this man a friend. The PI had photos. 3 different meetings in the past 2 weeks. The way they touched in those pictures. There was no mistaking what they were. After that call, I started paying more attention to see what I'd missed. And it was all there. The way she talked about him was casual, but too often. I realized I'd brushed it off as work talk before. Now I saw it for what it was, affection hiding in plain sight. All the signs I'd ignored hit me at once. People think betrayal is about secrets, but it's more often about what we choose not to see. What hurt the most was how long she'd been building this second life right next to mine. I wondered if this guy was the real father of the kids. The DNA test didn't tell me who the father was, only who it wasn't. But I knew one thing for sure, I wasn't him. And every time I looked in the mirror, I saw the fool she'd laughed about. The man who gave his whole heart to something that was never real. The father who wasn't. The husband who didn't see it coming. And the friend who got stabbed in the back from both sides. I started seeing things differently, not just in our home, but in our business. I began wondering if the lies ended at the affair, or if they had seeped into the company too. Something about our recent dealings with her lover, who was our client, didn't feel right. The numbers weren't lining up. I didn't say anything to Lauren. I didn't ask her questions or tip her off. Instead, I hired an external auditor and told him to look closely at our company's recent transactions with that specific client. The auditor worked through the financial records over the course of a few weeks. When he came back with the report, it confirmed what I feared. The client who was supposed to be paying us had, in fact, been receiving money back from us through a shell company. It was disguised as a legitimate third-party vendor, but the auditor traced its registration to a fake business address and a single controlling party. And Lauren? She had personally approved all those transactions. Her name was attached to every outgoing payment. What emerged wasn't just a few accounting mistakes, it was a pattern. The shell company had been set up to funnel money out of our business, and Lauren was making it happen. When I looked at it all together, the financial misconduct made everything clearer. This wasn't just a messy affair, it was a deliberate operation. Lauren had been stealing from the business, and the man she was having an affair with was involved. He wasn't just her lover, he was her partner in fraud. She had been using her position in the company to approve fraudulent payments, sending company funds to this shell entity tied to him. She was gutting the business from the inside and feeding it to the man she was cheating on me with. The affair had cost me far more than just my trust. It was costing me my company. Once I understood the full scope of what Lauren was doing, I knew I needed to act strategically. The first step was to block the money. I went into the company's financial systems and quietly rerouted the approval chain. I removed Lauren's access without making it obvious, and I froze all outgoing payments to the shell company. I flagged them as needing manual review, but in reality, I had stopped them completely. I didn't tell her. I didn't ask her about it. I wanted her to believe everything was still going according to her plan while I dismantled it piece by piece. With the money stopped, I knew the next move had to be legal. I reached out to my lawyer. I explained everything, and that I wanted out of the marriage. I told him one thing clearly. I didn't want to lose everything I had worked for. Not my company, not the houses, not my investments. He listened, then outlined a plan. We would transfer my assets into a trust, one that wouldn't be directly linked to me, but legally structured to protect my interests. It would take time and had to be done carefully to avoid raising suspicion, but it was legal and solid. The next step was the divorce. My lawyer brought a divorce attorney in to handle the family side of things. He suggested we file in a nearby state where the law still weighed infidelity heavily in divorce proceedings. That detail mattered because it meant Lauren's betrayal would not just be emotional leverage, but legal leverage too. We quietly prepared the documents. I signed where I needed to, answered every question honestly, and followed the strategy exactly. I didn't want a messy fight. I wanted a clean break that protected me. Over the next few months, I moved every major asset into the trust. But I didn't do it all at once. I took my time. Everything went into my mother's name on paper, but legally it was structured to remain under my control. I wanted no room for Lauren to make a claim on anything once the divorce started. By the end of the process, everything she thought we owned together was no longer within her legal reach. The hardest part during that stretch wasn't the paperwork, it was pretending everything was fine. Every evening, I walked into that house knowing what I knew, and I had to act like a husband who hadn't caught on. I smiled when I had to. I nodded through dinner. I kept my voice calm when I felt like screaming. I began staying back at the office working. I left early for business trips I didn't need to take. I avoided any unnecessary interaction. I created space, not just to protect myself from exploding, but to avoid giving her even the slightest suspicion that I knew what she was doing. Because if she caught on, she'd start hiding things too. I couldn't afford that. I was already living in a house full of lies. I just needed to finish building my exit door before I walked out. I waited until the trust had been finalized and every asset I cared about was safely protected. Only then did I give the green light to my lawyer to file the lawsuit. We had gathered every financial document, every irregular payment, every late-night wire transfer disguised under fake vendor names. The case was solid. I instructed my lawyer to sue both Lauren and her lover for corporate fraud. I was suing them criminally for siphoning money from the company I built. The morning they were due to be served with a court summons, I didn't take any chances. I pulled the kids out of school and sent them straight to my parents' house. I didn't want them anywhere near the storm that was about to break. It wasn't just for their safety, it was also for their hearts. They didn't deserve to hear their mother scream and curse and blame everyone but herself. I knew it would get ugly, and I wasn't going to let them be collateral damage. It didn't take long for Lauren to explode. The minute the papers were delivered to her, she came crashing through the door of my office like a hurricane. No warning, no knocking, just rage. She slammed the summons down on my desk like it was some kind of insult, not a consequence. Her voice was sharp, trembling more with disbelief than fear. "What the hell is this, Chris? You're suing me? Are you serious right now?" I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I looked her dead in the eyes and said, "If you think you're innocent, go to court. Prove it." Her mouth opened, but no words came out, just a slight quiver in her lip, and that vacant look people get when their lies start catching up to them. She stormed out, furious but shaken. That was the first time I saw the fear crack through her arrogance. Later that night, when I came home, the real explosion happened. The moment she saw me, she charged. "You took the kids away from me? What the hell is wrong with you? How dare you do that without telling me?" I didn't say a word at first. I just took off my coat and hung it slowly, keeping calm. That's when she screamed loud enough to shake the walls. "Why would you take the kids away? They're not even yours to begin with." That was it. The mask finally fell. That one sentence came flying out in the heat of the moment. And she knew, the second it left her lips, that she had just admitted the truth out loud for the first time. I looked at her, then turned and walked to my home office, opened the drawer, and pulled out 2 envelopes, the divorce papers, already signed by me, and the DNA test results confirming what I already knew. I handed them to her. "I've known for a while," I said. "That's why this marriage is over." She opened the envelopes, her expression frozen somewhere between panic and denial. Then I showed her the photos. The private investigator had done his job well. Hotels, dinners, kisses. It was all there in glossy, high-resolution truth. She didn't say anything. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Just silence. And for Lauren, that was rare. Eventually, when she did find her voice, it wasn't to apologize. It was to threaten. "You think you're going to get away with this? I'll take everything from you. I'll drag you through court until you have nothing left." I laughed. "Lauren, I already own nothing," I said plainly. "You've got a week to leave this house, which, by the way, you no longer own. And you're out of the company too. Fired. Embezzlement violates the very first clause in our employee policy." She glared at me, furious and cornered. "This won't end well for you," she snapped. I looked her right in the eyes and said calmly, "Then do your worst." I never imagined I'd have to call the police on the woman I once promised forever to. But that day came. I gave her time to leave on her own after I filed for divorce, but she stayed there, acting like nothing had changed. So one morning, with a tight chest and a bitter taste in my mouth, I stood by while the police escorted her out. The fraud case took longer, much longer. We found out just how deep the rabbit hole went when the forensic accountants finished going through the company records. She and her so-called lover had siphoned off funds for nearly 2 years. The lawyers defending my wife and her lover floated the idea of an out-of-court settlement. They didn't want a court ruling because that would have left a mark on her lover's business. Something about investors losing confidence. I didn't care. I refused. I wanted it all in writing, in ink, signed and sealed in public record. So we went the long way. The court ordered them to pay it all back. The restitution alone buried them in debt. They looked stunned when the judgment came down, like they thought they could charm or spin their way out of consequences. The divorce itself wasn't any prettier. It dragged on for months, too. Lauren walked in with her chin up, still thinking she could somehow spin the story. Her lawyer pushed for spousal support, saying I owed her a lifestyle. I pushed back with receipts, bank statements, shalog, DNA tests. The judge saw through it all. She had spent marital money on another man, lied to me for years, and let me believe I was a father to children who weren't biologically mine. The court sided with me almost across the board. She got no spousal support. What little she was awarded in the division of assets was rerouted to pay back the money she'd stolen from my company. She left the courtroom with nothing in her name but a purse and a broken reputation. But through it all, the hardest part was the kids. They heard things. They saw tension. Kids are smarter than we give them credit for. One night, my youngest wrapped her arms around my neck and whispered, "You're still my dad, right?" That shattered me. I had every reason to walk away, every legal right. But I could not because I had to, but because I chose to. So I fought for custody.